Welcome to Phantom Radar Battalion, locking onto today's key events of July 31st, 2024. Let's dive into the most pressing global developments across different regions. The Middle East remains a focal point of intense geopolitical activity. Hezbollah has issued a statement declaring Israel a temporary state that will soon be removed from the map. This rhetoric is backed by Iran, which is currently holding an emergency meeting of its Supreme National Security Council at Khamenei's residence. The presence of the Quds Force commander indicates the gravity of the situation. G. Merrick Garland has stated, "We believe that the Iranians are attempting to kill or injure President Trump." This accusation underscores the ongoing tensions between the U.S. and Iran, particularly regarding U.S. support for Israel. The Harris-Biden administration has faced criticism for allegedly funding the Iranian regime, which remains the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism. Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, has called for a joint war against Israel with Iran to avenge Ismail Haniyeh. This call for action has further destabilized the region, adding fuel to the already tense situation. The U.S. envoy to the Security Council highlighted Iran's arming of groups in Lebanon, Yemen, and Iraq, which continues to destabilize the region. In Syria, Assad's forces targeted the village of Afes, east of Idlib city, with high explosive missiles, and shelled the vicinity of al-Nairab village in Idlib countryside. The Syrian National Army, SNA forces, hit the SDF positions in Tel Leban, Abus, and Say Ali villages on the Tel Tamar line with artillery fire. Hezbollah and Iranian militias have completely closed the entrances and exits of the Sayyida Zainab area in the southern Damascus countryside, signaling preparations for further conflict. Reports from Baghdad indicate an explosion northeast of the city, with U.S. officials confirming a defensive airstrike south of Baghdad targeting militants readying to launch a drone attack. Iraqi police reported 1 dead and 7 wounded from 3 explosions at a popular mobilization forces base south of Baghdad. Additionally, a ballistic missile originating from Iraq aimed at Eilat was intercepted, preventing further escalation. Israel conducted an airstrike in Iran, targeting Ismail Haniyeh, a senior Hamas leader in Tehran. This move has further strained relations, as Haniyeh was involved in ceasefire negotiations mediated by a Qatari-Egyptian team. In Syria, IRGC General Amir Ali Zaid was reportedly killed in an Israeli airstrike in Damascus this morning. The United States has increased the travel advisory for Lebanon to level 4, advising against travel. Delta Airlines, United, and British Airways have announced that they will stop flights to Israel starting tomorrow, reflecting the heightened tensions in the region. Unrest continues in Venezuela, with significant information warfare efforts shaping perceptions on the ground. Mass arrests of groups responsible for counter-Maduro unrest have been reported, but some military commanders have voiced opposition to Maduro, complicating the situation. General unrest persists in major cities, with businesses in Caracas operating with fewer products than usual. Increased potential for banditry on remote roads has caused long-haul cargo drivers to refuse to drive, and public transportation routes are disrupted. The complexity of the Venezuelan situation highlights deep-rooted issues. While President Maduro's administration is often cited for corruption and economic mismanagement, the ongoing unrest also reflects widespread dissatisfaction with election integrity and governance. International observers and organizations continue to call for transparency and democratic reforms, but the situation remains volatile. Venezuela's economic struggles are further exacerbated by international sanctions and the government's tight control over natural resources. The U.S. and its allies have imposed sanctions aimed at curbing Maduro's power, but these measures have also contributed to the economic hardship faced by ordinary Venezuelans. Inflation remains rampant, and access to basic necessities is increasingly limited. The humanitarian crisis is deepening, with many Venezuelans fleeing to neighboring countries in search of better opportunities and stability. In the United Kingdom, unrest in Southport remains kinetic, following Monday's stabbing attack that killed 3 children. Large pro-immigration counter-protests have also emerged, adding to the tensions. The government's response to these incidents has been heavily scrutinized, with calls for more effective community engagement and policy reforms to address the underlying issues. The Southport incident has sparked a broader debate about public safety and immigration policy in the UK. As communities grapple with these complex issues, there is an increasing demand for comprehensive strategies that balance security concerns with the need for inclusivity and support for vulnerable populations. The government is under pressure to demonstrate leadership and implement measures that can restore public confidence and foster social cohesion. In Africa, conflicts continue to plague several regions, exacerbating humanitarian crises and destabilizing local economies. In the Horn of Africa, clashes between ethnic groups in Ethiopia have resulted in numerous casualties and displaced thousands of people. The government's efforts to mediate and resolve these conflicts have so far been insufficient, leading to calls for international intervention. In the Sahel region, extremist groups continue to pose a significant threat, carrying out attacks on civilian and military targets. These groups exploit the region's political instability and economic hardships, recruiting disaffected youths and expanding their influence. Regional governments, with support from international partners, are working to enhance security measures and address the root causes of extremism, but progress remains slow and challenging. In the United States, Boar's Head has expanded its recall of potentially contaminated deli meat to include an additional 7 million pounds nationwide. The recall, initially for 200,000 pounds due to an outbreak of listeria, has resulted in hospitalizations and at least 2 deaths in 13 states. Analysts note this as one of the largest meat recalls in recent history, highlighting food security vulnerabilities. President Biden responded to comments by Speaker Johnson, who called the Supreme Court reform dead on arrival. Biden retorted, "That's what he is," followed by, "He is dead on arrival." This exchange underscores the ongoing partisan tensions in Washington and the challenges of pushing through significant legislative reforms in a divided political climate. In Iowa, a train derailed in the community of Glidden last night. Local reports indicate at least 3 dozen cars derailed catastrophically, with recovery efforts underway. No hazmat concerns were reported by Union Pacific, but the incident has disrupted transportation and raised concerns about railway safety standards. Indications of potential Israeli combat operations in Lebanon are mounting. The U.S. Embassy in Beirut is preparing for possible unrest involving U.S. citizens, urging them to enroll in the STEP program and prepare to shelter in place if evacuation via commercial aviation is not available. Several airlines have already delayed or canceled flights into Beirut due to the risks of a widening conflict. Analysts suggest that the strategic situation in the Middle East is highly volatile, with Israeli ground operations in Lebanon appearing increasingly likely. Over the past few weeks, airstrikes from Israel and rocket strikes by Hezbollah have intensified in the Golan Heights, suggesting a de facto state of war. The international community is bracing for potential large-scale ground operations by Israel and Lebanon, which would be markedly different from the conflict in Gaza. The ongoing geopolitical shifts, including the BRICS nations' efforts to establish an alternative to SWIFT, signify significant changes in the global economic landscape. The reduction of dollar dependence among major economies could have far-reaching implications for international financial systems. These developments are closely monitored by financial analysts and policymakers, as they could reshape global trade dynamics and economic alliances. That's all for today's briefing. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more news and insights.